Hi, and welcome to another edition of Legally Insane News. I'm your host, Kyle O'Donnell. As promised, I'm releasing all the behind-the-scenes interviews with all of the people that you see on the film, Big Trouble in Little Quartzsite, as well as everyone that didn't make it into the feature film. Some of these speakers you'll see in the upcoming release of the series as well. Be sure to stick around for that. If you don't have a membership, go ahead and get one on the video level. But in any case, some of these interviews, behind the scenes interviews, will be in video and some will just be audio only. This one happens to be in video, and it was probably the second or third interview that I had with Jennifer Jones. Every single interview that I have with her is extremely telling. She knows the whole thing like the back of her hand, and it's probably because she was one of the main targets. But she invited me out to a vendor table that she runs and had some very interesting things to say about the relationship between Jeff Gilbert and Rain Goldenbear. What she describes as Rain being basically the Joseph Goebbels of Quartzsite, because they needed a media arm in her description. Very interesting things there. She also talks about the alleged statutory rape case involving a QPD officer and a local youth. There's a local judge named Judge Veterman. He was apparently one of the good guys, and he requested an FBI investigation into the QPD and the council alleged corroboration there. Just tons and tons and tons of stuff in this interview. It's just over an hour long. The interview itself switches between two cameras. Unfortunately, right near the end, I had my production assistant who had diabetes was having a low blood sugar incident, and we had to kind of stop rolling, so it gets a little funky, and there, right in the middle there, due to the same thing, she was recording dual audio that I couldn't get off of there, so a little bit of it, there's a tiny little echo, but it's still very listenable, very palatable. So apologize for that, but in any case, this is the public release, so it's just the truncated version, but my Legally Insane News fan club members get the full version. For that one, head over to legallyinsanenews.com and sign up for the membership that suits your needs. There's a free membership as well as several other tiers, depending on whether you like to read articles, listen to podcasts, or watch all the videos, which include feature-length films, series episodes, and all the extras and outtakes from all my films. Now, enjoy the ride.
Sometimes on the weekends I go out to the local flea market and I sell jewelry that I made. Or
what do you make? Do you actually mine this stuff? Do you get this stuff from Quartzsite or like?
Well, I bought a lot of stuff in Quartzsite, and then, for instance, these are World War II artillery shells from the Kingman Gunnery Range that we hand polish, and I put stones in. So I have amethyst and rose quartz and different kinds of stones, and I can do custom stuff and string the beads and different, I have the plain artillery. So it's history you can wear. That's the thing. It's World War II history, Kingman history, something unique that everybody can have and or give as a gift.
Cool. All right. So moving right along, and if somebody comes up, don't worry, we'll step away.
Okay. Okay, good, because I need to buy more phone minutes. It ran out yesterday at 2 o'clock, so, or whatever it was.
Okay, so last time we talked, you told me that Rain was friends with Gilbert and the council and all that other stuff. So talk to me like we never had a conversation the other day.
Okay.
Tell me basically that connection.
Okay. Well, you can't really discuss what happened in Quartzsite unless you address the big tattooed elephant in the room, because corruption doesn't happen on its own and continue like that unless you have a complicit media or a bought and paid for media. And, the problem that we had in Quartzsite was this woman came into town with her partner. We used to call them the Scary Bears. But, no background in journalism or anything, had done a brief stint in sales, selling ad space in a newspaper somewhere up in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon or something. And the cabal essentially bought the newspaper for her. So Anna English is her real name, or was her real name, a.k.a. Shanana Rain Goldenbear. And her spouse is Joy George or George Joy, I'm not really sure, and you're not allowed to ask, or they'll put a restraining order against you for hate speech. Not joking, really happened. AKA Star Bearcat. So Rain writes the copy, and Star would take the photos and things like that. And we didn't realize that she was the official mouthpiece for the cabal in Quartzsite until we tried to send letters to the editor. Of course, her editorial disclaimer is, I don't have to print anything I don't like. So we realized that we had this extremely biased propaganda machine going on, and no one was countering it. And, John Gutekunst at the Parker Pioneer, he's a nice guy, but one time after a public meeting, he came up and confided to me quietly. He said, I wish I could do the kind of reporting that you do. So, geez, the Mike Pence fly. So anyways, John Gutekunst is a nice guy with the Parker Pioneer, but he confided to me at a public meeting quietly, whispered in my ear. He said, I wish I could write the things that you write. And that was part of the problem was, the only newspapers, quote, legitimate newspapers, were either in Parker or Blythe, and Quartzsite wasn't really a priority for them. So Rain had a monopoly on Quartzsite, and only once things got really bad did other newspapers start to kind of cover it. But they covered it because I was forced to start a newspaper. Now, I'd never had a newspaper before, but I was a published writer. I mean, I had contributed to some things, so, I had some experience.
Let me pause for a second. Are you hearing any wind noise on her at all? The wind's picking up. Do you hear any wind noise on that mic?
I'm not hearing.
None. I'm going to run and grab my wind mic, my wind guard, just in case.
Okay, because it could pick up more,
Yeah, I don't want to get shitty audio.
The later in the day, the more wind we get here.
Okay.
I always say it's Golden Valley. If it doesn't suck, it blows. Sorry.
No, that was great. That was great.
I mean, I've never seen anything so horrible in my life. Like everything, just the wind, just.
It's kind of like what's the difference between a job and a wife? After 10 years, the job will still suck.
There you go. But our house in Kingman is not the same, and I keep trying to tell my husband because I do most of the work on the property and I spend most of the time on it, and he takes care of the chickens that are at the house and all that kind of stuff, and he doesn't understand that what the weather's like at the house in Kingman. The minute you come over the pass, it's not the same. And I'll be talking on the phone to him in the middle of the day, and I'll be like, "Geez, this wind is like just raging." He goes, "Oh, it's not bad here at all." Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. It's a little too hicky on there.
Yeah. Okay, that should be good. And we're still recording, so you can.
Oh,
so
okay.
Hold you aside.
Right. So, it became very obvious that we weren't going to get any deep investigative journalism from the Parker Pioneer. Most of their stuff is kind of fluffy pieces. I'll give you an example. One of the county supervisor's sons was, I think, murdered in a drug deal gone bad. That's not the kind of thing the Parker Pioneer would like to cover, or the Parker police chief hitting on his subordinate's wife and having a restraining order put against him. Literally, the woman who was being sexually harassed came to me and said, "No one else will print my story. Will you cover it?" And I said, "I heard that there was a restraining order. And is that true?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, then that's the story. The facts."
So, given that nobody's printing negative news and all of a sudden you show up and tell this type of stuff, what kind of reputation does that give you?
Oh my gosh. Well, it didn't take long before I was getting harassed and everybody who was writing for me was getting harassed or involved with the newspaper. See, it's not just that there was a group of what Martin Brannon called self-styled activists, right? Which I thought was kind of funny, because had I known, I would have hired a professional stylist. If I was going to be an activist, I didn't know this was a thing, right? But we couldn't get anybody to talk about what was going on. So,
before you go into that
right.
any further, does that describe to me the atmosphere that a lack of having stories like that, what
Right.
does that do to the community? What do they generally think is happening in the community? And then contrast that with what happens in the community once you start talking about that.
So for a long time, people were not aware of what was going on. They were basically in an echo chamber. It would be like if all you listened to was CNN and you never listened to anything else, you would have one mindset about what was going on in the world. So essentially, Rain was like Brian Stelter, and I was like, I don't know, Andrew Breitbart or something, right? I come along and I'm like, hello, stuff's going on. I think you need to look at this. And they were like, oh, hell no, shut her down. Rain would get a sort of early information about breaking stories and things. For instance, when the town destroyed Richard Oldham's runway without a warrant, Rain and Star were already there taking pictures. When I got the phone call from one of Richard's employees, like, hey, you need to get over here. What the hell is going on, right? But they already were tipped off. Rain's newspaper box was the only one allowed on the steps of Town Hall. They would send her press releases and stories. They would pay to send her to represent the town at events like the League of Cities and Towns and things. They literally paid to send her as a representative of the town. And, I did essentially the same format of publication that she did. And I looked at her ad rates. I know what the cost was for every color page, every black and white page. You can't make money off of it. I mean, not in that particular market. It was very difficult, right? So I firmly believe, but could never prove, that she was essentially getting paid on the side or getting kickbacks for promulgating this propaganda. And that's the problem. When you don't have a fair and independent media, then, people don't know what's going on. So here, I come along, and basically, my phone would start ringing every time the Desert Messenger would come out, and they'd be, oh my God, did you see what she wrote this week? No, what did she write this week? And then I would dig into the story, and I would have to try and come up with the actual facts and things that came out. It got so bad that I actually did have to sue her in an attempt to remove a blatantly false, completely defamatory story that she wrote about me that still has come back to haunt me to this day. I was never able to get it off. The case was dismissed without a hearing because, as we've learned in the last year or so, in civil court, if a judge doesn't want to touch a political hot potato, they can just punt. Oh, no standing. Oh, couldn't possibly make a case for which relief could be required. Oh, don't want to touch it. And they could just shelve it. It's not like a criminal case. But I did at least cost her some legal bills, for the bad things that she had done. No one in Quartzsite was sowing more hate and division within that community than Rain.
How was she doing that?
Well, I mean, for instance, when I started publishing my newspaper, it was free, just like hers. Her friends organized a boycott of local businesses if they carried my newspaper. It didn't matter if the two were side by side. And that nutty Hygeia Half Moon lady that was the police chief's biggest fan, would stand outside the post office holding signs telling people to boycott my newspaper, boycott restaurants. They put up flyers all over laundromat, boycott the Desert Freedom Press. And then you have to remember, Mayor Foster wrote a column in my newspaper. Mike Roth wrote a column in my newspaper. Russell Sias occasionally contributed to my newspaper. I mean, who was getting arrested? Everyone involved with my newspaper. Poor Dana Stadler got arrested, and all he was guilty of was delivering my newspaper for free, just because people wanted to hear the truth. And, I always believe that the truth will set you free, right? Just keep printing the truth. And the people should be smart enough to read both newspapers side by side and figure out for themselves what's real. And the thing is I closed my newspaper when I left Quartzsite with about 30,000 readers per edition across both counties. Because you don't just deliver to Quartzsite, you need to deliver to Parker and to Havasu and to Blythe. You need to let people outside of your area know what's going on. That's how I got the Parker papers to cover stories and the Blythe papers to cover stories. Because people were like, whoa, this is news. How come the other paper isn't talking about it? It forced the, quote, legitimate media, the establishment media, to step up their game a little bit. you know.
Now, speaking of what people are and aren't publishing, a lot of people that I met throughout this thing, in the film, in fact, that have said, you know, Rain's paper was the positive paper, and you're the one who was complaining. Why would they have that impression?
Well, because she's a very two-sided person, okay? She promotes this false front of everybody holding hands in the sandbox and playing nicely together and peace and love and kumbaya. The whole time, though, she's got a knife stashed in her, you know, ready to stick people in the back. So she would promote this whole false image that really isn't who she was. You know, I mean, if you did not agree with her friends or her elected official supporters or whatever it was, you know, she was not above just getting vicious and nasty. You know, it's frightening, really. You know, I mean, it got so bad that her spouse, Star Bearcat, assaulted me, physically elbowed me in a public meeting in front of the police chief and the city council members and the whole 9 yards, and everyone saw it in the whole room. But nobody did anything about it. The police chief and Alex Taft just laughed, you know. And we were getting pushed, and we were getting shoved, and we were, you know, they literally got a restraining order against me because I thought, well, who are these people that are assaulting me, that are hanging out at my business in a weird kind of creepy stalker way, looking around and stuff like this is. I never had any problem with them. I mean, I don't care who you are, how you get your freak on, what you do, who you love, who you marry. I really don't care. I do care when white people come to Quartzsite, culturally appropriating Native American heritage and tattooing their faces, and they want to hold a sweat lodge, which is what they were trying to organize back around 2008. They wanted to have a sweat lodge in a town full of retired people on heart medication. Seems like a bad idea. So I was like, who are these people, and how did they get here? And how did they become so entrenched? Because these are not people who could be successful in the outside world. And that's when I found out that the newspaper had been essentially bought for her, and that she really was one of the insiders, and that literally that was her job, to paint these evil, corrupt people in a beautiful light. It's all rainbows and unicorns. When, you know, these people were just horrible, corrupt swamp creatures in reality, but she was managing the perception. And so once I realized that, I wanted to know who they were. I ran a background check on them, and they got a restraining order against me for literally nothing more than running a background check. And when that didn't work, you know, when one thing didn't work, then they'd try another thing. I think they tried to get 2 or 3 restraining orders, each one would expire. At one point, they were so threatened by my newspaper that Rain and Star went to get an injunction against harassment, and they got I had to stay 6 feet from them. So what they were trying to do was keep me 6 feet from photographing any news story, because they would stand right in the middle of the thing, you know. So that way I couldn't get up close. I couldn't interview the same people. I couldn't. And they actually had a party at Jerry Lucason's restaurant where the council people got together, and they made a 6-foot pole, and they painted it, and they brought it to a city council meeting, and they were waving it around to make sure at all times I stayed 6 feet away from them. And essentially, with the size of the room at that time, it was very difficult even to get to the podium in the middle of the room to publicly speak, with them standing there trying to keep that 6-foot pole between us. Finally, they were told to stand down on that kind of behavior. But nobody wanted anybody reporting actual facts or truth. And the thing that I think really speaks to my integrity, even though I was willing to peel back the layers of the onion and show all the things and expose what was really going on, was the fact that I was never sued. I never had to print a single retraction, nothing. The only mistake I made was I pulled the wrong guy's photograph off of the Facebook page because I didn't know there were 3 guys with the exact same name on the Indian reservation, and they were all relatives. And so I did a story, and I put the wrong guy. It was his nephew or his uncle or something, you know. But I mean, it wasn't. I was not like I was being called out for publishing fake news. I was publishing what was actually going on. If someone had been doing that, all along, I don't think any of the things that they were doing would have actually gotten to where they ended up with, by the time we get to 2010.
All right, so I'm going to pause recording for